Imagine an empire so powerful, so vast, so utterly dominant that nothing could challenge it. This empire controlled 70 million people across 3 continents. Its military was undefeated. Its authority was absolute. Its resources were unlimited. It had the power to destroy anything it deemed a threat. And there was a threat, a small Jewish religious movement spreading through the empire like a virus. The empire didn't consider it a serious military threat, but it was a threat to order, to authority, to the empire's control. So the empire decided to eliminate it. They persecuted it. They executed it. They imprisoned it. They burned it. They made it illegal to even possess its sacred texts. For 300 years, the empire threw everything it had at this movement. And then something extraordinary happened. The empire failed. Completely, utterly, spectacularly. Not only did the empire fail to destroy this movement, the empire accidentally became the movement's greatest ally. The empire's own infrastructure became the movement's distribution network. The empire's persecution became the movement's expansion strategy. The empire's opposition became the movement's greatest strength. By the time the empire realized what was happening, it was too late. The movement had conquered the empire from the inside. The religion that the empire tried to eliminate became the religion of the empire itself. This is the story of Rome. The story of how history's greatest empire accidentally built the infrastructure for Christianity's conquest. How Rome's every attempt to destroy Christianity only made Christianity stronger. And it reveals something profound about power, opposition, and the law of unintended consequences that still shapes our world today. This is what happens when an empire tries to destroy an idea. This is how Rome spread Christianity across the world. By the 1st century AD, Rome had built something the world had never seen before: a true superpower. Rome controlled the Mediterranean. Rome controlled Western Europe. Rome controlled North Africa. Rome controlled the Middle East. Rome's roads connected continents. Rome's military was invincible. Rome's government was sophisticated and centralized. Rome's economy dominated global trade. No empire had ever been this large. No empire had ever controlled this many people. No empire had ever had this much power. Rome's power came from a simple formula: military might, administrative efficiency, and absolute control. Every province had a Roman governor. Every city had Roman soldiers. Every region paid taxes to Rome. Every person ultimately answered to Caesar. The system worked because Rome was organized, efficient, and willing to use overwhelming force to maintain order. Rebel? Rome would crucify you. Refuse to pay taxes? Rome would confiscate everything. Challenge Roman authority? Rome would execute you. Into this empire of absolute control came a tiny religious movement. It started in a backwater province called Judea. It was founded by a Jewish peasant who was executed by Rome. Its followers were fishermen, slaves, poor people, women, the lowest classes of Roman society. The movement taught radical things: that all people were equal before God, that the poor were blessed, that the last would be first, that you should love your enemies and pray for those who persecuted you. For Rome, this was dangerous, not because it was militarily threatening. A handful of poor people with no weapons couldn't threaten Rome's legions. It was dangerous because it undermined Roman order. It told people that Caesar wasn't ultimate authority, that God was. It told slaves that they were equal to their masters before God. It challenged the hierarchy that kept Rome in control. So Rome decided this movement had to be eliminated. Rome didn't hesitate. Rome didn't negotiate. Rome used the same method that had worked against every other threat: overwhelming force and absolute intolerance. Rome persecuted Christians. Rome executed Christians. Rome imprisoned Christians. Rome confiscated Christian property. Rome banned Christian gatherings. Rome made Christianity illegal throughout the empire. For 300 years, Rome sustained this persecution. It was systematic. It was brutal. It was comprehensive. And Rome expected the same result it always got: the elimination of the threat. But this time was different. This time, Rome's power worked against Rome's interests. This time, Rome's attempts to destroy something actually made it stronger. To understand how Rome accidentally spread Christianity, we need to understand what Rome had actually built. Rome built 250,000 miles of roads. These weren't dirt paths. They were engineered highways, multiple layers of stone and gravel, drainage systems, way stations every 20 to 30 kilometers where travelers could rest. These roads connected every major city in the empire. A person could travel from Rome to Britain following Roman roads. A person could travel from Rome to Syria following Roman roads. Rome had created an unprecedented transportation network that united a continent. Rome built this network to move troops quickly, to transport supplies efficiently, to maintain imperial control over vast distances. Rome invested enormous resources building these roads. Rome maintained them continuously. Rome's entire system of power depended on these roads. But Rome never intended these roads to be used by Christian missionaries. Rome built them for imperial control, not religious expansion. Yet that's exactly what happened. The Apostle Paul understood something crucial. If you want to spread a message across an empire, you use the empire's infrastructure. You don't build your own roads. You use the roads already built. Paul traveled the Roman road system. He went from city to city following Roman roads. Each road had been built and maintained with Roman resources, Roman engineering, Roman labor. Paul didn't build any of this. Paul just used it. And as Paul traveled these roads, he established churches. In each city, he would preach, convert people, train local leaders, and then move to the next city. Each journey covered hundreds of kilometers. Each journey would have been impossible without Roman roads. But Paul wasn't unique. After Paul, other Christian missionaries traveled the same Roman roads. They followed the same routes. They used the same infrastructure. Each missionary journey spread Christianity to new regions. Think about what Rome had done. Rome had built a continental transportation network. Rome had maintained it. Rome had invested billions in it. Rome had done this to maintain imperial control. Then Christians used this transportation network to spread Christianity across the empire. Rome's infrastructure for power became Christianity's infrastructure for expansion. Rome had accidentally built the highway system for its own replacement. The cities, Rome's gift to Christianity. Rome didn't just build roads. Rome built cities, strategically placed cities positioned to maximize Roman control. Rome established cities at trade crossroads. Rome established cities in conquered territories. Rome filled these cities with diverse populations: soldiers, merchants, craftspeople, slaves from across the empire. Each city became a commercial hub. Each city became an administrative center. Each city became a cultural crossroads where people from different backgrounds mixed, traded, and exchanged ideas. Rome built these cities to consolidate imperial power. Rome never intended them to become centers of Christian expansion. Yet that's exactly what happened. Early Christian missionaries understood something Rome didn't. Cities are where change happens. Cities have diversity. Cities have communication networks. Cities have access to surrounding regions. If you want a message to spread, you establish it in cities first. The Apostle Paul targeted major cities: Corinth, Ephesus, Galatia, Thessalonica, Philippi, and eventually Rome itself. He didn't evangelize the countryside first. He established churches in major cities and let them spread outward. Why? Because cities were connected. A person in a city could travel to other cities. Merchants moved between cities regularly. Ideas moved along the same networks that moved goods. Rome had built these cities. Rome had filled them with diverse populations. Rome had connected them with roads and commerce. Rome had created the perfect environment for a new idea to spread. Christians occupied Roman cities. They established churches in Roman cities. They used Roman cities as bases for spreading the gospel to surrounding regions. Within a generation, nearly every major city in the empire had a Christian community, not because Christians had built these cities, because Rome had built them and Christians strategically used them. Rome accidentally created the ideal infrastructure for Christianity to build a connected network across an entire empire. Now comes the stunning irony that defines this entire story. Rome tried to crush Christianity through persecution. Rome executed Christians publicly. Rome imprisoned them. Rome confiscated their property. Rome made it illegal to even be Christian. But here's what happened. Persecution scattered Christians. When Rome persecuted Christians in Jerusalem, believers fled to Antioch. When Rome persecuted Christians in Antioch, believers fled to Alexandria. When Rome persecuted Christians in Alexandria, believers fled to Rome itself. Each person fleeing persecution went to a new city and established a church in that new location. Rome was literally pushing Christian believers across the empire, and each believer became a missionary in new territory. Rome's persecution was Christianity's distribution system. It gets more ironic than that. Rome executed Christians publicly, in arenas, in town squares, in front of crowds. Rome's goal was to terrorize people into rejecting Christianity. The thinking was simple. Watch what happens to Christians. Be afraid. Don't become Christian. But it backfired spectacularly. When non-Christians watched Christians die peacefully, praying even as they were executed, something unexpected happened. People were moved. They were disturbed. They were impressed by the courage. They wondered, what belief is worth dying for? In many cases, observers of Christian martyrdoms converted to Christianity. The public executions Rome designed to discourage Christian conversion actually encouraged it. Rome was creating martyrs. Martyrs became heroes. Heroes attract followers. Rome's violence became Christianity's greatest recruitment tool. By the 3rd century, being Christian meant risking death. This meant that Christians who converted were deeply committed. The half-committed had already fallen away. What remained was a core of true believers who would die rather than renounce their faith. This kind of commitment is unbeatable. Rome could persecute it, but Rome couldn't break it. The more Rome persecuted, the more committed the remaining Christians became. And the committed ones were the most effective evangelists, because when someone is willing to die for their faith must be real, and real faith is contagious. Rome persecuted Christianity for 300 years. Every year of persecution scattered more believers. Every persecution created more martyrs. Every martyrdom attracted more converts. Every scattered believer became a missionary in new territory. Rome's weapon became Christianity's strategy. Rome's persecution was Christianity's expansion plan. Rome built a postal system called the cursus publicus. Government messengers traveled routes carrying official correspondence. These messengers could cover 50 kilometers a day. Important messages could travel from Rome to Syria in a matter of weeks. Rome built this system for one purpose: to keep the vast empire coordinated, to allow the emperor to send orders to distant provinces, to allow provincial governors to report back to Rome. But Christians discovered something. If you had a message you wanted to deliver reliably across distances, you could use Rome's communication infrastructure. The Apostle Paul wrote letters to churches across the empire. These letters were delivered using Roman postal systems and Roman roads. Paul's letters maintained connection between early Christian communities. They provided theological guidance. They built unity between churches separated by vast distances. These letters became scripture. They defined Christian theology. They established the intellectual foundation for the early church. Paul didn't build communication infrastructure. Paul didn't hire messengers. Paul didn't establish postal routes. Rome had done all of that. Paul just wrote letters and sent them on Roman roads using Roman postal systems. Without the Roman postal system, Paul's letters would have been extremely difficult to deliver. They might have been lost or delayed for months. Instead, they traveled reliably across the empire, reaching their destinations within weeks. These letters united Christian communities. These letters prevented doctrinal fragmentation. These letters created theological coherence across the empire. Rome built a communication system to maintain imperial control. Christianity used that same system to build theological unity and maintain connection between distant churches. Rome's infrastructure for power became Christianity's infrastructure for organization. By the year 300 AD, after 300 years of persecution, Rome faced an uncomfortable truth. Persecution didn't work. Christianity had grown from a tiny fringe movement to include millions of people. It had spread to every major city in the empire. It had established itself in every province. It had survived 3 centuries of official opposition. Rome had tried everything: execution, imprisonment, confiscation, public ridicule, legal prohibition. Nothing had worked. If anything, Christianity had grown stronger. Rome's best efforts to eliminate Christianity had failed. Rome's attempts to suppress it had accelerated its growth. Rome's persecution had scattered believers as missionaries. Rome's public executions had created attractive martyrs. Rome had built the roads Christians needed. Rome had built the cities Christians occupied. Rome had built the communication system Christians used. Rome had created the persecution that scattered Christians as missionaries across the empire. Rome had done everything except what Rome intended to do. Then, in 312 AD, something changed. Constantine, a Roman general who would become emperor, claimed to have a vision before a crucial battle. He saw a cross in the sky. He attributed his victory to the Christian God. He converted to Christianity. Constantine didn't invent Christianity's growth. Constantine didn't cause Christianity to spread across the empire. Christianity had already done that. Constantine simply recognized what had already happened. By the time Constantine converted, Christianity was already the dominant religious and social force in the Roman Empire. Constantine just aligned the political power of Rome with the religious power that Christianity had already built. Constantine's conversion wasn't the cause of Christianity's triumph. Constantine's conversion was the result of Christianity's triumph. But here's the ultimate irony. Constantine was doing exactly what Rome had been trying to prevent. Rome had persecuted Christianity precisely to stop it from gaining this kind of power. Rome had executed Christians precisely to prevent them from influencing the empire. And then, 300 years later, Rome itself converted to Christianity. The empire that tried to eliminate Christianity became a Christian empire. Rome's persecution failed. Rome's opposition backfired. Rome's every attempt to stop Christianity only made Christianity stronger. What does this teach us? First, it teaches us that opposition often strengthens what it opposes. Rome assumed persecution would weaken Christianity. Instead, persecution strengthened Christian commitment and scattered believers across the empire as missionaries. Rome's opposition accelerated Christian growth. This pattern repeats throughout history. Communism tried to suppress religion. Religion survived and often thrived in communist countries. Authoritarian regimes try to silence dissent. Suppression often strengthens dissent. Opposition creates martyrs, and martyrs inspire movements. Second, it teaches us that infrastructure built for one purpose can be repurposed for another. Rome built roads for military control. Christians used those roads for religious expansion. Rome built cities for administrative dominance. Christians used those cities for theological centers. Rome's infrastructure was neutral. Its impact depended on who used it and how. This is relevant today. Technologies built for corporate profit can be used for activism. Platforms built for entertainment can spread social messages. Infrastructure is just infrastructure. What matters is who uses it and for what purposes. Third, it teaches us about the power of committed communities. Christianity didn't spread through force or coercion. It spread through committed believers willing to sacrifice everything. They didn't need armies or government support. They needed courage to keep going despite opposition. This suggests that movements succeed not primarily through resources or power, but through commitment and courage. The most powerful force isn't military might or government authority. It's people willing to sacrifice for something they believe in. Fourth, it teaches us about unintended consequences. Rome never intended to spread Christianity. Rome's intentions were the opposite. But Rome's actions had unintended consequences that ultimately favored Christianity. Rome built infrastructure Christianity could use. Rome's persecution scattered Christians as missionaries. Rome's public executions created attractive martyrs. This is a humbling lesson. We often can't predict the consequences of our actions. The systems we build to solve one problem might create opportunities for something else. The opposition we mount might strengthen what we're trying to oppose. Rome intended to suppress Christianity. Instead, Rome did more to spread Christianity than any Christian missionary could have done deliberately. Rome accidentally became Christianity's greatest distributor. The empire that tried to destroy Christianity ended up spreading it, and in the process, Rome revealed something profound about how history works. That power doesn't always work the way we intend, that opposition can strengthen what it opposes, and that the greatest transformations often come through unintended consequences. Rome built the structure of its own transformation, and Rome did it entirely by accident.